Hello makers! In this video I'll be upgrading the firmware of my Cocoon Create Touch from ADV i3++ version 4.0.0 beta 2 to the full release ADV i3++ version 4.0.3. The Cocoon Create Touch is a rebranded Wanhao Duplicator i3+. It's also sold as the Monoprice Maker Select Plus and Microcenter PowerSpec Wanhao Duplicator i3+. I first upgraded my printer with the ADV++ version 3 sometime late last year after watching a video by Teaching Tech. This gave me basic BLtouch auto bed leveling. Later on the 21st of April, Sebastian released version 4.0.0 beta 2. Beta 2 had the improved BLtouch support and it was much better. 3 days later, as of the 24th of April, he released beta 3 with some bug fixes. Then on the 9th of June, ADV i3++ version 4.0.0.0 released was published. At this point I should have upgraded, but the bugs hadn't affected me and I was busy printing. Sebastian was not idle and on the 15th of June released version 4.0.1. It was a few bug fixes. On the July the 1st, 4.0.2 with a few more bug fixes was released. Then again on the 12th of July 4.0.3 was released. As of this video, it's now October and no new bug fixes have been released, so that tells me Sebastian has got them all. I know he plans to add more features in the future: support for proximity sensors, support for filament runout detectors, support for i3+ Mark II power loss recovery, support of the Wanhao Duplicator D9, and port of the ADV i3++ to Merlin 2 using the new extensible UI API. But for now, this version is stable and bug free and well worth every dollar I've contributed to his Patreon account. Patrons have access to the community and can download the releases of versions up to 4 months before any files are released on GitHub. There is also an excellent guide on installing the firmware, and from the forum there's also support provided. Once you've signed up in Patreon, head on over to the ADV++ community and select the version you want to install. In this case, it's ADV i3++ version 4.03. I have the BLtouch, so I need ADV i3pp-mainboard-4.0.3.hex. You'll also need to download the ADV i3pp-LCD-4.0.3.img.zip. The first file is for the main controller on the 3D printer. The second file is for the LCD touch display. Again, in the community forums there is detailed user documentation, including a section on flashing your firmware. The first thing we need to do, first thing we will need is an 8GB micro SD card. Now I happen to have one here that I've used before to flash this, and I keep it aside especially for flashing this because they are getting harder to get hold of. Some of the higher level Patreon supporters actually get a micro SD card shipped out to them. I've noticed that it's listed as full on those 2 levels above where I am. I think that's because he's got enough to ship out as it is. So what we're going to do is install this micro SD card into my SD writer on my adapter and turn it on. Okay, so I'm going to use Etcher to copy the image of the files I need onto the micro SD card. So first thing we need to do is select an image. In this case, ADV i3pp LCD. Now I initially extracted the image, hence the subdirectory, but Etcher will actually take the zip file and extract it automatically. We need to select the drive, which will be that one, and then we can flash it. It doesn't take very long to copy the file over. The actual content needing to go on there is not very big. It simply contains a series of screens for the LCD touch panel. Okay. Once it's finished validating, we will need to power down the Cocoon Create Touch and install the SD card into the screen. For those who haven't printed out a new front panel to put on there to make easier access, you will need to do some disassembly of your printer. And it is now finished. Okay, with the printer turned off, we will insert the micro SD card. Now, one of the recommendations when I did the upgrade to the original firmware on this is to print out this front cover so that you can gain access to the micro SD card without having to pull it apart. If you haven't got one of these on, you will have to disassemble the front cover off and then remove the back plate so you can get to the printed circuit board inside with the micro SD slot. It clicks into place, and then all we need to do, power it up. Once powered up, it will start to load all the screens on, one by one, cycling through. When it finishes cycling through all of the screens that it can display, you can then power it down and remove the micro SD card. There are quite a number of screens. Okay, that should be all of the images uploaded, so now we can power it down and remove the micro SD card. Tweezers is handy for this. Okay, we power it back up. Now it will tell you that the firmware on the main board is different to that of the LCD. So our next trick will be to update the main board firmware. Okay, to do the firmware update I'm going to do this through Octopi. In Octopi there is a plugin you can use to do firmware updating. This does work with the Cocoon Create Touch, as I've done this before. So we're looking for the ADV i3pp-BLtouch mainboard 403.hex. We open that, we flash from file, it's now writing to memory. Now verifying the memory. And our flash has been successful. Settings stored in the EEPROM are not compatible with this version of the firmware. For this reason, the settings have been reset and you either have to manually enter the settings or redo the tunings. So we'll have to redo the tunings. Okay, with the firmware updated and the LCD updated, it's time to actually calibrate stuff for use. So when we go into info and version, you'll actually see we're running 4.0.3 on the LCD, the same on the main board. We've got a build number. DGUS firmware is actually the firmware running on the LCD, and the Marlin firmware is the version that ADV i3++ is built on. All of the firmware updates to this are available on GitHub. Okay, so first thing we need to do after doing this update is to calibrate the sensor. But before we can calibrate the sensor, we really need the bed warm. If you try and calibrate these things with a cold bed and a cold nozzle, you'll find that any hard plastic or PLA poking at the end of the nozzle will actually ruin your setup. So we're going to go into control first and preheat. 180 on the nozzle and 50 on the bed is more than enough for this calibration. So we will start preheat. And you can see here that it's actually got the temperature set at the bottom and the current temperature at the top. So the bed's set at 50, currently it's 19 and climbing. There's this nice little graph down here that is showing us the temperature. Blue is the bed and the pinky colour is the nozzle temperature. When we get up close to somewhere near where we want to be, we will go through and do our calibration. To do our nozzle height calibration, it'll first do a home, and then it'll allow us to manually adjust the height from the LCD. The original manual that came with Cocoon Create Touch specified 0.1mm nozzle height when leveling the bed, so we're just going to go with the same. Sebastian, who wrote the firmware, doesn't actually specify. The other common one is to use a sheet of standard copy paper, 80 GSM copy paper, as being approximately the correct height. So this is getting close. The other problem you can have with a heated bed is you can get some warping as they heat up, and so we need to make sure that we account for that with our nozzle height adjustment. So even on the front screen here, it's showing us the current temperatures and the current height. Now it's reading 0 as being, or Z as being at 0, because since I've turned it on I haven't zeroed it. So let's go to tuning, sensor, and we'll just check and make sure it works. Reset. Yep, I have got a problem there. Let me just go back. Settings. Yeah, my offsets are wrong. Okay, the original settings that I had are no longer in here, so I'm going to have to put in a custom. Which appears to be 10mm on the XL offset on the positive side. And 40mm from the Y. Now, because it's forward, it's negative 40. At every step of the way, when you are doing a reconfiguration or a recalibration of your machine, have a look at where things are, just to make sure that where you're looking at them and where they should be is about right. If not, check your measurements again and check your settings. Save that. Now let's try that again. That's a bit better. Okay. There's a little bit of rubbish underneath there, so we'll pull that out before we start. Switch to 1mm increments and move down 1mm. And that slides under very easily, but I don't think I'll go another millimetre. And that feels pretty good. So mine's minus 1.12. Click the button to save it, and all is good. Okay, next we go control, leveling, automatic, and we let it do its thing. Okay, when you look at the bed level, you can see I've got this front right corner set at 0. It's slowly sloping down towards the back left corner, and that's why we use auto bed leveling to correct these minor errors. To be quite frank, 0.04 of a millimetre, 0.03 of a millimetre, I'm never going to be able to correct that manually. At best, I'll get that one to minus 0.06 at best, but highly unlikely. So I'll accept that and let auto bed leveling do its trick in the future. So now that we have this back up and running, I can now do some more test printing. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe, and YouTube thinks you'll like these other videos.